Hey, what's going on? It's your boy BT, and I came here to talk some boxing with the thousands of True School Sports subscribers. Now, special video here. I really wanted to do this video because following the Roman Gonzalez, the devastating loss that he suffered against Rungviasi in the rematch, I saw a lot of people talking trash about Roman Gonzalez. I've seen a lot of people, not just on YouTube, but all over social media that have just been discrediting Roman Gonzalez. They've been saying that he's garbage, a guy that small can't be pound for pound number one, and then they'll make stupid examples and they'll say things like, well, Roman Gonzalez only fights one style, and Roman Gonzalez can only, he only comes forward, and he's only a volume puncher, and and then they'll make stupid comparisons and compare him to guys like, they'll say, well, Roman couldn't make adjustments against Rungviasi, but Andre Ward can make adjustments against all the fighters he fought, and Mayweather can make adjustments, and all those things. And I think that's a really stupid argument, because I think the one thing people have failed to understand about the smaller weight classes is that you can't be selective with your punches. You can't, or I don't want to say be selective, but you can't be as selective with your punches as, let's say, those guys at the higher weight classes, because there's thousands of punches being thrown. These guys age quicker, they take more punishment, and I'm gonna prove that in this video, because you can look at the history of boxing from right now all the way back to even the 80s or the 70s or even the 20s. But for the sake of this video, I'm gonna only use fighters from the last 40 to 30 years, because if the further you go back, you can't get accurate dates with certain fighters. So yeah, this video here will basically be just talk about Roman Gonzalez, and like if he never wins a world title again, or never even challenges for a world title, and he basically just never ever returns to prominence in any way, shape, or form, then his flyweight decline, at flyweight and 115 pounds, his decline is right on par with some of the greatest people to ever fight around this weight. So we're gonna get into that right now. We have to establish one thing, because I know I'm gonna get a lot of people on this video, and I hope so, because that's the people I'm talking to. A lot of people, ever since he lost to Rungviasi in the rematch, got stopped brutally, and even before that, they had the audacity to say, who did Roman Gonzalez ever beat to deserve being pound for pound number one in boxing at any point in his career? And I made a comment to someone who asked me that recently, and I'm not gonna run through the whole thing. I mean, you guys will be able to see it on the screen. I'll screenshot what it is exactly I'm reading from, and you can fact check me on everything I'm saying. Roman Gonzalez has, without a shadow of a doubt, on his resume, because people say, well, he hasn't beat anybody to become pound for pound, and if you go in and do your research, he's beaten 2 future Hall of Famers and potentially 3. And those 3 people, and I'll run through the resumes in a minute, but he beat Juan Francisco Estrada, who's going to go to the Hall of Fame one day. He beat Brian Valoria, who should go to the Hall of Fame one day. And he beat Edgar Sosa, who's a borderline Hall of Famer. Estrada, he became a unified champion at flyweight, WBA, WBO. He defended those belts 5 times before moving up to 115 pounds. Defeated guys like Brian Valoria, standout fighter, 4-time world champion, 230 wins, 8 losses in the amateurs. Beat Donito Donaire in the amateurs, 2000 U.S. Olympian. That's one of the guys that Estrada has on his resume. Beat Giovanni Segura, who was on the pound for pound list at one point in his career. So he beat guys who were pound for pound fighters, and he also recently just beat Carlos Cuadras, a guy who was a good champion himself, and he still has a pretty long way to go in his career. You got Brian Valoria, who was a 4-time world champion, Olympian, great amateur. He actually was another guy who beat Giovanni Segura at the time when Giovanni Segura was ranked number 9 on the pound for pound list in 2011, ahead of Andre Ward. He also wound up defeating, and this is Brian Valoria I'm talking about, Henan Marquez, Eric Ortiz, Omar Romero, all guys who were former world champions. And Roman destroyed Valoria. He had a good fight against Estrada. Roman also fought Edgar Sosa, albeit he was a bit past it, but still had a little bit left in the tank. Edgar Sosa was a guy who, held the WBC light flyweight title, had 10 title defenses, defeated the likes of Brian Valoria, Giovanni Segura, Ulysses Solis, And when he actually lost, I don't know if you guys know this, but when he lost his WBC title after all those title defenses, he lost to Pong Seklek Wongjong Kim. I don't know if I'm saying his name right, but the Filipino fighter, probably the greatest I believe he's Filipino. No, Thailand or Philippines. I can't remember where he was from, but he's arguably one of the greatest flyweights who ever lived. Wong Jong Kim had 90 wins, 5 losses, 47 KOs, and I believe he defended his lineal crown over 10 times when he was world champion. And that actually, when he beat Sosa, like following that win against Sosa, that actually propelled Wong Jong Kim in 2011 to number 7 on the pound-for-pound list, above Timothy Bradley and Andre Ward. So Sosa was clearly one of those guys that if you beat him, he was good enough that if you beat him, you know, you yourself became one of the best in the world. So he's a borderline Hall of Famer himself. And then you get those guys like Quadras, who was a good champion, Yagashi, who was a lineal champion, you know, Takayama, who held a 5-time world champion, at minimum weight, held every variation of the minimum weight title at some point in his career, except the WBA title. You know, super consistent fighter. You had McWilliams, Arroyo. So Roman Gonzalez, let's not get it twisted. As you guys can see there on the screen, he's got bodies on his resume. Roman Gonzalez, his resume is one of the best in boxing, and I just wanted to establish that real quickly before we get into anything else. That Roman Gonzalez has done some great things in boxing. You know, lineal champion, the only Nicaraguan fighter to win a world title in 4 weight classes. Defended all of his titles, with the exception of 115. Defended all of his titles at 105, 108, and 112 at least 3 times before moving up. So you gotta respect Roman Gonzalez. He's a true champion, and we have to establish this in the first part of the video. So the first fighter that I wanted to use to illustrate my point about how flyweights and guys in the small weight classes actually decline quicker, I'm going to use one of the probably, you know, this guy to me might be the most underrated Mexican fighter of all time. For those of you who don't know, this guy was named Flyweight Fighter of the Century along with the great Pancho Villa in 1999. You know, had a great career, you know, had 61 wins, 9 losses, you know, 4 draws, you know, won the WBC flyweight title. He successfully defended it 14 times. You know, and the other 13 times, you know, he had 1 KO win in that span, TKO win in that span, and in the other 13 times, he actually won the distance. And mind you, he won the distance at a time where they were fighting 15 rounds. So if you guys think it's crazy now where these flyweights are throwing thousands of punches, imagine back then, way back in the 70s and in the 80s, when this guy was fighting. You know, he was going the distance with 15 rounds. Really well-conditioned fighter. Didn't have the best punching power in the world, but one of the reasons I say that this guy might be the most underrated fighter. As far as Mexican fighters go, and just one of the most underrated fighters, period, is that, you know, he is probably the greatest defensive Mexican fighter of all time. And you don't have to take my word for it. As you guys can see on the screen, you know, he has tremendous defense. Very few fighters, if any, from what I've seen, from all the great fighters I've seen from yesteryear to today, I've seen very few fighters with the ability to use the ropes as well as Miguel Cotto. So shout out to Miguel Cotto. Wasn't a big guy. He was only like 5 feet tall. Didn't have the best punching power, but had tremendous boxing skills. He knew how to use the ring and the ropes, especially in those later rounds when you need to do that. But you know, with this guy being able to go the distance 13 times in a span where he defended his title 14 times successfully, I think that lends credence to him being one of the greatest fighters of all time. And to defend your title at that weight class where you can't duck anybody 14 times, man, that's truly incredible. But Miguel Cotto, much like Roman Gonzalez, you know, his decline was around the same exact time as a Roman Gonzalez, you know, because physically, from a physical standpoint, you know, most people's primes are from the ages of 27 to 30. That's people's physical primes are. But like I said, the aging process at this weight class is a little quicker. So, you know, you don't really get to enjoy your physical prime too long, because usually these guys are in wars. It's hard to avoid wars in this weight in the flyweight division because of the the amount of punches that are being thrown, and these guys can punch really hard at the weight. So Miguel Cotto, you know, he basically by the age 31, he was done at the championship level. If you go look at his career, you know, the last time he fought for a world title was against Chan Hee Park in 1979. He had a draw in that fight with Chan Hee Park, who was undefeated at the time, and then he never challenged for a world title again. So he was pretty much done at the championship level by 1979. He never challenged for another one again, and really didn't fight anybody too much of note after that. But regardless, 31 was when he was done at the championship level. Roman Gonzalez is now 30 years old, and a lot of people think that he's going to be done at that championship level. I mean, his birthday is what, in June, so he'll be 31 next year. So it's on par with Miguel Cotto. Miguel Cotto fought in a much more brutal era than Roman Gonzalez, and you know, the 15-round era, where guys were just a lot more dangerous. You had to be more well conditioned. I think fighters that did back then were much more sharper and much more well conditioned than they are today. So yeah, Miguel Cotto, a truly great fighter. If you guys don't know about him, I would advise you. You're seeing the clips on the screen. Go look more into his career. He's probably the most underrated Mexican fighter of all time, and the best, in my opinion, not even close. It's not even close. He's the best defensive Mexican fighter who ever lived. So yeah, he was done at the championship level by 31. Roman was done by well, Roman was not done yet, but if he never does anything again in his career, he's at 30 years old when he's done at the championship level. So on to the next one. This next guy right here, he's probably the greatest light flyweight ever. You know, actually, I believe it was Ring Magazine. In 1994, in the middle of his career, while he was still fighting, he was rated the greatest light flyweight of all time. And it's a guy that, you know, at times I've heard boxing fans compare Roman Gonzalez to. They actually say that he is this generation's version of this man. And well, obviously, we're talking about the little hands of stone, Michael Carbajal. Man, what a great fighter he was. And in many ways, I do believe that Roman Gonzalez is the Michael Carbajal of this era, because Michael Carbajal was a truly dominant, destructive fighter. You know, he had some great fights with guys like, you know, Chiquita Gonzalez and Jorge Arce, and you know, what's his name? Jake Matalala. If you guys don't know who that is, probably the greatest South African fighter of all time. He was actually Nelson Mandela's favorite boxer. So a little fun fact there about one of the guys he lost to in Matalala. But Michael Carbajal was a destructive fighter. He had tremendous power, great volume puncher. You know, at 108 pounds too, you gotta also factor this in. At 108 pounds, Carbajal, at 5'5" and a half, that's what he's listed at. He's listed at what, 5'5" and a half, which is about the same height as me. Because I remember I actually interviewed Michael Carbajal back in Las Vegas earlier this year, and we were about eye level, and you know, so Roman Gonzalez is what? Roman Gonzalez measured in at 5'3", so he was tall. He was definitely taller than Roman Gonzalez, but their fighting styles were very similar in a way where Michael Carbajal had the volume punching. He went to the body really well. Same thing with Roman Gonzalez, but Carbajal, much like Roman, you know, he retired at 32. So he retired at 32. But if you look at his career, you know, in what was it, in 1997 was where the decline started for Michael Carbajal. Really, he lost a split decision, and ultimately he wound up in that fight. What wound up happening was he lost a split decision to Mauricio Pastrana, and he lost his IBF light flyweight title in that fight. Then he took a fight against Scotty Olsen, got a KO in that fight, and then to finish off 97, he winds up taking on another stay busy fight with the South African that I mentioned earlier, Jacob Matalala. Who, by the way, if you guys don't know this, Jacob Matalala is probably, at least at that time, he was definitely the world's shortest boxer. Nelson Mandela's favorite boxer of all time was Jacob Matalala, and they were friends too. And Mandela would, you know, visit him regularly in South Africa. And Jacob Matalala was 4'10". Michael Carbajal was 5'5", you know, and a half, so he almost 5'6". So you know, he had about roughly a 6 to 7 inch height advantage, you know, 4 or 5 inch reach advantage, and Jacob Matalala destroyed this dude. You know, he was I I believe at that time he broke the record for the most punches thrown, or he was on pace to break the record for the most punches thrown in the history of boxing in any match. So Jacob Matalala was definitely no joke. And Michael Carbajal, this happened to Michael Carbajal in '97, so he was 30 years old when he lost his fight. Does that sound familiar to you guys? A 30-year-old fighter having problems with a guy's punch volume. Roman Gonzalez, same thing happened to Roman Gonzalez. You know, the only difference between Carbajal and Gonzalez was that Roman Gonzalez's guy was much bigger than him, and punched way harder than Matalala. Matalala wasn't known for his power, but he wore down Carbajal, and at 30 years old, he was done at championship level. By 32, he retired. Now, granted, Carbajal was able to rebound from that loss, and he closed out his career. His last fight of his entire career, he stopped Jorge Arce, who went on to become who was a good fighter himself. So, yeah, I mean, there's definitely similarities between Roman Gonzalez and Michael Carbajal. Both were destructive punchers. Both, at 30 years old, suffered losses, destructive, life, career-changing losses to guys who were ridiculously high volume. Like I said, the only difference between both of them is that Matalala was way shorter than Rungviasi, and he wasn't the puncher that Rungviasi was. So they had to deal with their fighters in different ways, but they suffered the same way. While Roman's career is still going on, you know, he has a slightly higher KO percentage than Michael Carbajal. Michael Carbajal had a 63% KO percentage. And this is coming in what 53 career fights. Roman Gonzalez, you know, has a 79% KO percentage. So, you know, if Roman doesn't retire soon, it could be heading towards that Carbajal territory. But yeah, definitely similarities, and I do think that Roman Gonzalez is definitely the Michael Carbajal of this era. Roman Gonzalez is literally Michael Carbajal with like he challenged himself more than Carbajal, because Michael Carbajal only fought at 108 his whole career. Roman fought at 105, 108, 112, and 115 and won world titles in all his weight classes. So when you look at that, you got to look at that and how he challenged himself against bigger men, and how high his KO percentage is. It's above 75%, which is really hard to do at that weight class at that size. So yeah, Roman Gonzalez is definitely the Michael Carbajal of this era. And you know what? I actually wanted to show you guys this. I actually asked Miguel Cotto what would happen in Roman Gonzalez fight. What would happen if they ever fought in their primes? And here's what he had to say. After this, I'll close the video out. But I want to, while I'm talking about Miguel Cotto and Roman Gonzalez, I figured it'd be cool to roll this clip. So roll the clip. Talking about another exceptional, you know, fighter, Roman Gonzalez. What do you think about Roman Gonzalez? And when you watch him, what are some things that stand out to him to you?
I like his combinations. He throws a lot of combinations. It's not 3 or 4 punches, it's 5 or 6 punches. And he keeps doing it all the time, and he changes it up. And I like him. He's a great fighter. I know we live in reality, but I'm saying in fantasy world, if you were to fight a Chocolatito, like how would you fight him? Like, what would be your game plan if you fought Roman Gonzalez? I put a lot of pressure on him, the same way that I always fight.
Yeah.
And I just watch him, and but I put a whole lot of pressure on him. I wouldn't let him get off those. He has great combinations, and I would have to stop that.
Yeah, and and one thing that's really good about him is like very few fighters have mastered the art of like turning a guy in one motion. Like maybe the ring might get cut off, but he can turn a guy all in one motion and then kind of turn the tables on him. So like it'd be interesting to see that.
Yeah,
you guys are 2 pressure come forward type of fighters.
That's why I would put a lot of pressure on him and not let him do that.
Yeah.
So I'll do it to him. So that's what I would have to do. So I think it would have been a great fight. So when I make these videos about these flyweight boxers, the guys from these weight classes under 130 pounds or 122 pounds, these guys who are really small, a lot of times you guys will hear me say, well, these guys age quicker, you can't do certain things with the small weight class that you can do with the high weight classes. And a lot of you will look me crazy, but to illustrate my point, and this will be to preface everything I'm going to say for the rest of this video. You know, a lot of times, like for example, I know a lot of people on, particularly, you know, people on YouTube. There's a lot of heavyweight boxing fans, and I'm a heavyweight boxing fan. I think
the heavyweight division is great, but it's great in a different way than for the flyweights. It's a different flavor of boxing. It's almost like candy, you know. Some of us like Twix, some of us like Snickers, and then some of us don't like Twix. We don't like chocolate at all. Some of us like sour candy. So it's kind of like that, but with people and, you know, their fighters and stuff like that. So, you know, if you look at some of the greatest flyweight fighters of all time, we'll look at guys like Michael Carbajal, Miguel Cotto, you know, guys who have been rated by some of the top boxing publications as the greatest flyweight fighters of their time, you know, or in the history of boxing, period. You know, they're retiring at 32. They're done at championship level by 30 years old, 31 years old. So, you know, that's why it's so imperative to get paid in your prime when you're a flyweight fighter, because with all these punches being thrown, you know, they're taking a slower beating and the decline is much more sharper than, let's say, guys at heavyweight, you know. Guys at heavyweight can fight punch drunk. You know, perfect example of that is the most popular, arguably the most popular boxer of all time, about Muhammad Ali. You know, when he fought Leon Spinks and all these guys, he was in his late 30s. You know, to give you guys a more recent example, you got a guy like Manny Pacquiao who just had his recent fight against Jeff Horn, and he was 37, 38 years old. And, you know, Floyd Mayweather was in his late, you know, 30s as well when he fought Pacquiao. So it's not like the welterweight division or the middleweight division, you know, where Golovkin is now, you know, Gennady Golovkin, great fighter, one of the greatest middleweights of all time in my opinion. But Gennady Golovkin, he was what, 35 when he fought Canelo? He'll be 36 by the next time he fights. So, you know, the aging process and the decline of a flyweight fighter is much sharper than that of a middleweight, than that of a heavyweight, than that of a light heavyweight, because for one, these guys I mean, because they're much smaller, their power for the most part, for most flyweight boxers, they don't have one punch knockout power. Most flyweights don't. It's more of like, you know, most guys, everybody in the division pretty much is a volume puncher. So if everybody in the division is a volume puncher, everybody you fight is throwing a lot of punches, and you got to be prepared for that. And if you're not, and if you can't match that work rate, you're not going to last in the division, which is why I say the division is different. And you can get away with not throwing a lot of punches at welterweight, middleweight, light heavyweight, and heavyweight. So for people to criticize Roman Gonzalez and say that he's only this and he's only that, most people don't follow the flyweights, light flyweights, or small weight classes in general. They don't even have any understanding for that. So, I mean, if the best guys in the weight class, we're talking about guys who made 14 consecutive title defenses in an era where there was 15-round fights, and, you know, if those guys, you know, are done at championship level in their early 30s, then anybody else below them is going to be done in their early championship at the championship level in the weight class in their early 30s. And right now, with the way things are trending for Roman Gonzalez, you know, if you look at boxing history, he seems to be kind of heading for that. So I just wanted to illustrate that before I. So in closing, you know, Roman Gonzalez, not only is he a good fighter in this era, a great fighter in this era, but he is an all-time great fighter of the small weight classes. The only really living legend of the small weight classes right now that I can think of. You know, the dude challenged himself against bigger men. He really pushed himself. He's still trying to push himself, and this is a guy in Roman Gonzalez that deserves to be recognized, deserves to have worthy of praise. And I hope that with this video, you guys have gotten some context and more insight into the small weight classes, flyweights, light flyweights, minimum weight fighters. I hope you guys have gotten more insight to the weight class, because I've told you guys that. I've now shown you that Miguel Cotto, a guy who made 15 title defenses and was named the best flyweight fighter of the 20th century along with Pancho Villa, he was done at championship level by 31. Michael Carbajal, who's known by many as the greatest light flyweight of all time, he was done at championship level by 30 years old, 29, 30 years old. It's about the same age as Roman Gonzalez. So if these guys were able to do that, if they were able to basically just like have great careers, but by a certain age they were done at a certain level, you know, that should be taken. We should look at Roman Gonzalez, a guy who pushed himself, who fought in more weight classes than those guys. Granted, for Cotto there wasn't as many weight classes back then, but still, this guy pushed himself. He fought in more weight classes than those guys. Fought different crops of guys, bigger men in many cases. Roman Gonzalez, and he challenged himself time in and time out again, and his decline, you know, if he never ever wins another world title, if he never wins another fight again, he is an all-time great. He is a living legend, and you need to understand this. At 30 years old, you know, his decline is right on par with the other great fighters of yesteryear, the Miguel Carbajals, the Miguel Cottos, you know, even the Jimmy Wilds, who, you know, fought in a different era in the 1920s, but Jimmy Will was still a guy that, you know, around the same age he began to decline. And that's what it is. So I hope you guys have understood, with this video, I've been able to like, kind of like just give you guys some more insight into the smaller weight classes. You know, it's a different brand of boxing down there in the smaller weight classes. There's more punches being thrown. Fighters can't fight punch drunk because they'll get killed. You know, it's not like the heavyweight division. It's not the heavyweight division. It's not the middleweight division where guys can fight in the mid-30s, as we see today with guys like Golovkin and Pacquiao who are fighting in their mid to late 30s. It's not like you can't be like Ali and fight 38, 39. It's very rare, and if you are, it's probably just because you need the money. Because guys by 33 are done, and guys by 29, 30, 31, 32, they're done at championship level. So, hope you guys enjoyed the video. Like the video, comment, subscribe, do all that good stuff. And as I always say, you can love me or you can hate me, but I'm just a kid from Daniel. So until next time, take care, guys.